Alright, so what we're going to do is open up the hinge part of this lathe, the Suri lathe, just to show exactly how this lever operates this head up and down. To understand this will make life a lot easier for people who are using this machine. So I'll take the head off first, then I'll remove the lever itself. Now all of this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. Once we get into slightly more complicated territory, I'll explain a bit better about what exactly I'm doing. So then what we've got is we're left with this shaft here. Now what the main thing I want to do here is show what this shaft is and how it works. So what I'm going to do next is take off the part of the machine which you attach your head to. Now that's going to require a little bit of messing about with this dash part. And I think you should probably do this, I don't know, every now and again to keep the machine clean and well lubricated. I'd love to say we do it once a year. We probably don't, but something like that. Okay, so we all know what these bits do and how they work, so I won't talk about that too much. Now, this block, oops, that the top of the dash pod is connected to, has an Allen key, an Allen bolt in the side of it. Now, when you first, you don't necessarily have to take this off, but I'm going to today because it makes it easier. When you first take that out, you'll find that it's really, really hard to crack. And that's because it's got some thread locker on it. Ours is probably not going to be that hard, but I remember the first times that I did it on these machines and I was shocked at how difficult it was to crack this guy. That's coming off pretty nice. So we can now undo these grub screws here and here, which form the main part of the hinge. They are torqued up to a fairly specific amount. I don't think you need to be too fussy with it, but what you should know is when you're putting this back together is you shouldn't over tighten these because they're bearing onto a ball bearing. And what you've got is it's a 4mm grub screw with a 10mm nut locking it. So the nut, I don't know how well we're seeing this, that nut there around, here we go. Are you getting that? Okay, so that's the lock nut. This middle bit is just a regular grub screw. And if we undo this lock nut, oh, that was tight. We then can undo the grub screws if you have the right Allen key in your hand. Okay, here it comes. So that is it. And there's a bit of dashpot goo on the turntable, that's nice. Okay, so let's just get this sitting here. Okay, so what we're left with is this block. This here is the end of the large grub screw that you can access from the back. Now, a lot of people probably don't know what that grub screw is for and have never messed with it. And I would say there's probably no reason to mess with this regularly. Like it's set by Suri when he makes them, and it should just work. However, if you bought your machine secondhand or somebody in the past has messed with it for some reason, knowing how to set this is important. And I will now show you exactly how it works. Okay, so here on the bottom of this hinged section, there's another grub screw, which we will undo. And what that will do is release this shaft. So I'll just put this down for a second. Somewhere. Okay, so this, first of all, that is the a little gap for that locking grub screw, the one I just took out. That sits in there to stop the shaft from moving. Then we come to this part which is kind of like a cam lobe, I guess. It's an off-center. We're getting this.
Yeah, maybe this one.
This is like a shaft within the shaft which is off-center. So when I turn it, what it actually does is it bears on this piece, which is inside the main body of it. I'll show you in a second. And when this pushes on here, it moves. This bears on here. When you turn your lever, it pushes this in and out, which gives you the up and down motion. This part actually sits right here, and this is where the adjustment comes in. So when this piece, so this is all trying to show you without the body of it. This piece here, when it turns, it pushes on this grub screw, which is adjustable from the back. I think it's an 8mm Allen key. And I will show you, or demonstrate what it looks like at the back of the thing. So, if we put this back together, is that, imagine my lever is on here, and what happens is when you turn it, you can see that little nylon kind of log moves like a piston inside that hole. What that does is when that pops up like this, it bears on this, which is adjustable in and out because it's a big grub screw. And then what that does is it forces this part up and down. So understanding the workings of this is very handy for understanding. Like a lot of people think when I pull this lever down, there's actually pressure going down. The only way that this head can move down is by gravity. There's no actual mechanical force pressing the stylus into the plastic. Now I'll put it back together and I'll just show these grub screws. They've had a point machined into them on the end, which engages with the center part of this ball bearing, which is pressed into the body of this thing. Alright, so now I'm going to put it back together. I've emptied out the dash pot and we'll put some new oil in that once it's all back together. And really the only thing I'd sort of stress about this particular bit of the process is making sure you don't put too much pressure on these grub screws that form the pivot. So the way I do it is I locate one and then just sort of bring the next one in and just sort of feel around for its little point to go into the center of that thing. It's a bit tricky. Try and do it this way. See a bit better. Alright. So I think what you're looking for, I don't know if you've ever pulled a tone arm apart, but it's essentially the same thing, same mechanics going on. What you want is for it to move freely, but have no wobble side to side or up and down, which I think I've got there. Now this is one of my pet hates, well, one of the only things about this lathe which I don't like is the fact that this whole mechanism can move like this, which is a real bummer. It's to do with the slot in this piece. And sadly, there's not much you can do about it. And when there's little plastic parts in here, but they're probably nylon plastic parts, which bear on the edges of this slot, I guess they do wear out, and a little bit of that play could probably be taken out by replacing those, but it's one of the sad parts of the design, I reckon. So once we've gotten this far, I think we're probably putting this back together. So many awesome things about this lathe. It's kind of a miracle, I reckon. I reckon he's a real clever dude. He's managed to make a lathe that costs a very small amount of money and make heaps of them, which is clever. Okay, so the other probably important thing to mention is the amount of tension you're putting on this bolt here. Like if I crank that right up, this thing isn't going to want to move. So maybe tighten it up so it can't move, and then just back it off so that it can freely move there like that. And then really, that is all you really need to worry about. If you get this far, you'll be able to maintain pretty much all of the moving parts of the lathe, making sure that everything looks nicely lubricated, and maybe the lead screw. I mean, if you're taking this far apart, you might as well pull the whole lead screw out and turn it upside down and give it a clean and a lube up. But that's pretty much it. Alright, so here is the adjustment that can be made on this grub screw at the back. Now, remembering what this is doing is changing the gap between the main body of this pivot and the moving part. It's changing the gap inside that hinge by moving this grub screw, which is an 8mm Allen key, I think. Now, if I back it off towards me, the head will go down and you'll have less travel available to you. So as I turn this, the head goes down. Now, if I crank it up past where it was, it's going to go up, and it will get to a point where it's got too much travel now and probably won't make it all the way down to the bottom. Yeah, it's still just touching. So the point of this is, because the gap between the moving part of the pivot and the body of the pivot, that gap is what determines the travel of the head movement up and down. So if you're having problems, it's a bit of a touchy-feely thing, and there's probably some scientific way to actually set this thing, but all I know is when we've messed with this stuff, it's been fairly obvious where we should set it. So it's kind of easier if you pull your lathe out from where it is and be able to get good access to the back of it. And when you're setting your angles for the head, then once you think you've got that right, then start messing with this, and through a little bit of trial and error, you'll get the right amount of travel so that the head sits down and lifts up into the correct spot. And hopefully you'll never need to use this. But a lot of people buy their lathes secondhand, and who knows where this stuff has been set by the previous owner. So it's good to understand how this stuff works, so that when you are having problems, you'll have a better idea of how to fix each thing.